The first thing I saw when I turned onto my street was the pile of broken lumber where my dream house was supposed to be. For 3 seconds, I honestly thought I had taken the wrong road. The driveway was still there. The mailbox was still there. Even the oak tree I had planted beside the front porch was standing exactly where I remembered it. But the house itself was gone. Not damaged, not vandalized, gone. The walls had been ripped apart, the windows were shattered across the foundation, and an excavator was sitting in the middle of my property like it had every right to be there. I slammed on the brakes, jumped out of my truck, and stared at the destruction in disbelief. I had spent 3 years saving for that house, 2 years dealing with permits, contractors, inspections, and endless construction delays, and months personally choosing every detail from the stonework to the roof. Then I had left town for 4 days to attend my sister's wedding. 4 days. When I came back, the HOA had demolished it. I immediately called the number printed on the HOA notice board, and after several rings, a woman answered with the kind of confidence that told me she already knew why I was calling. It was the HOA president, Diane Mercer. I asked her one question. Why is my house gone? She didn't sound surprised. She didn't apologize. She simply said, your structure was in violation, and the board authorized corrective action. I thought I had misheard her. You demolished my house? I asked. She replied, the property was subject to enforcement. I looked at the destruction around me and felt my hands shaking. You didn't enforce anything. You destroyed my house. Diane told me the board had sent multiple notices and claimed I had ignored them. That was the first lie. I had received HOA letters before, but none had ever ordered demolition, and certainly none had given the HOA legal authority to send heavy equipment onto my property. I asked where the demolition order was. She said it was on file. I asked who issued it. She became quiet. Then she said, the board handled the matter internally. That sentence changed everything. Because an HOA board can enforce its covenants, collect assessments, and pursue certain remedies depending on the governing documents and state law, but an HOA does not simply become a county government because someone gets elected president. And Diane had just admitted that the board had handled the demolition internally. I walked around the wreckage recording everything with my phone. I filmed the broken walls, the destroyed kitchen cabinets, the piles of insulation, the exposed foundation, and the tracks from the excavator. Then I noticed something strange. There were no county demolition signs. No official condemnation notice. No county vehicles. No building department paperwork posted anywhere. Just an HOA violation notice stapled to a wooden stake near the driveway. I pulled it out of the ground and read it twice. It claimed my house violated the community's architectural standards because the exterior design allegedly did not match the established visual character of the neighborhood. That was it. No condemnation. No dangerous building order. No court order. Just an HOA architectural complaint. I called my contractor, Mike, and asked him if he knew anything about the demolition. His voice went silent when I told him what had happened. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. They called me 2 days ago. I asked what they wanted. He said Diane had contacted him and told him the house was being removed because the HOA had determined that construction had violated the community rules. Mike told her he had nothing to do with the decision. She apparently asked him to remove some materials from the site before the demolition crew arrived. He refused. That meant the HOA had been planning this while I was away. This wasn't some emergency action. They had organized it. I called the police next, expecting someone to show up and stop the machinery. An officer arrived, looked at the property, spoke with Diane on the phone, and then told me it appeared to be a civil dispute. I pointed toward the demolished house and said, someone entered my property and destroyed a building worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The officer told me I needed to document everything and speak with an attorney. I knew he wasn't going to solve the dispute for me, but I also knew I couldn't stand there arguing with the HOA president while the evidence disappeared. So I kept recording. This is an HOA violation notice. Diane nodded. This is not a county demolition order. She stopped talking. Robert then told her something that none of us expected. You need to stop all work on this property immediately. Diane tried to argue. She told him the board had authority under the community covenants. Robert cut her off. He said private HOA rules did not replace county building authority and that the county had no record authorizing the demolition. He ordered the demolition crew to stop removing debris until the county could document the site and determine exactly what had happened. Then Robert turned toward me. Do you have the original building permits? I told him they were inside my truck. I handed him the folder. He opened it, checked the permit numbers, reviewed the inspection stamps, and then looked at the remaining foundation. This structure was permitted, he said. And according to these records, it was inspected. Diane immediately stepped forward and said the HOA had rejected the design. Robert didn't even look at her. That doesn't authorize you to demolish it. The silence that followed was unbelievable. For the first time since I had arrived home, Diane wasn't in control of the conversation. Robert continued examining the property. He photographed the foundation, checked the utility connections, documented the demolition equipment, and asked who owned the machinery. The contractor operating the excavator suddenly became very nervous. He admitted the HOA had hired his company. Robert asked who signed the contract. The contractor pointed toward Diane. That was the moment the entire story changed. The HOA wasn't claiming the house had accidentally been destroyed. They had hired someone to destroy it. And they had done it without the county's authorization. Robert told everyone on the property that no further demolition or construction activity was permitted until the county completed its investigation. Then he placed an official notice at the entrance and ordered the equipment removed from the site. Diane looked furious. She told him the HOA board would challenge the order. Robert calmly replied, they can challenge it through the proper process. Then he looked at the demolished house again and added, but they cannot continue work while the county investigation is pending. The excavator shut down. The crew packed up. And for the first time, the HOA's demolition operation came to a complete stop. But I wasn't satisfied with simply stopping them. My dream house was gone, and someone had to answer for it. So I went home that night, opened every document I had, and started looking through years of HOA emails, architectural approvals, property records, construction permits, inspection reports, and meeting minutes. That's when I found something I never expected. Buried inside an HOA meeting packet from 6 months earlier was a sentence that changed everything. The board had discussed my property. But they hadn't discussed demolishing my house. They had discussed forcing me to sell the property. And next to my name was a handwritten note that said, owner refuses to cooperate. I stared at that sentence for several minutes. They hadn't simply wanted my house gone. They wanted the property. And suddenly, the demolition didn't look like enforcement anymore. It looked like a plan. I kept digging through the documents, and the deeper I went, the stranger it became. There were references to a proposed neighborhood expansion, a future access road, and a revised community layout that appeared to use part of my property. My property sat on one of the last undeveloped parcels connecting the neighborhood to a commercial road. If the HOA could somehow force me out, the land could become extremely valuable. Then I found the document that made my heart start pounding. It was a map. And on that map, my property had already been marked as part of a future community development area. The date on the map was from before my house was demolished. That meant somebody had planned to use my land before the HOA ever claimed my house violated the rules. I grabbed my phone and called the county inspector. Mr. Hayes, I said, I think you need to see something. He asked what I had found. I told him about the map. There was a long silence. Then he said, don't change anything. Keep every document exactly as you found it. And the next morning, when he arrived with another county official, they didn't come to inspect the rubble. They came looking for the paperwork. Because if that map was authentic, the HOA wasn't dealing with a simple architectural violation anymore. They were dealing with something much bigger. And when the county officials placed that map beside the original property records, one detail immediately stood out. And if it couldn't, then someone had made a very expensive decision to destroy my house without the authority they claimed to have. The county meeting ended with a temporary order preventing the HOA from entering my property, performing additional work, removing remaining structural materials, or altering the site without county authorization. As I walked outside, Diane followed me. She stopped several feet away and said, "You don't understand what you're doing." I turned around. My house was destroyed while I was away. She said, "This could have been resolved quietly." I asked her what she meant. She looked toward my property and lowered her voice. "You should have sold." That was the sentence I had been waiting to hear. Not because I wanted an apology. Because now I knew the real issue had never been my house. It was my land. I asked her who wanted it. She refused to answer. I asked her why the HOA's development map already showed my property as part of the future road. She said I was making accusations I couldn't prove. Then she walked away. But she had just confirmed something without realizing it. She knew about the map. She knew about the road. And she knew exactly why I was asking. That night, my attorney called me with another discovery. The private company behind the proposed road had recently purchased several parcels surrounding the neighborhood. If my property could somehow be absorbed into the community's development plan, the company could create a continuous route to the commercial road. My land was the missing piece. Then my attorney said, "There's one more thing." He had found a recorded document from years earlier. It was an easement agreement. And according to the document, the road the HOA wanted to build could not cross my property without my written consent. I stared at the page. The HOA couldn't legally build the road. They couldn't force me to sell. They couldn't change the boundary. And they couldn't demolish my house simply because they wanted the land. But someone had apparently decided that destroying the house might make the property easier to control. The next morning, the county inspector called me again. He said they had discovered something inside the HOA's records that required immediate attention. A second map. This one was even older. And written across the top was a handwritten note that said, "Acquire this parcel before construction begins. My parcel, my house, my land." And now the county wanted to know exactly who had written those words, because the signature beneath the note belonged to someone nobody had mentioned during the entire investigation.